Hello, and welcome to the Business Leaders Coach podcast, where we help business leaders and entrepreneurs build businesses that grow and flourish. My name is Toyo Shimbi, and welcome to episode 23. Now, in this episode, I'm going to share with you 5 mindset shifts to become a 21st century leader. Now, in as much as we are going to have guests and we're going to interview guests, at the same time, this podcast, I want it to be your coach. I want to be your business coach, even through this format, giving you tips, quick, actionable tips that you can immediately apply to your business. And today's episode, actually, I put my thoughts around this prior to the current pandemic that we're going through with the coronavirus. And however, I found it so relevant. I recorded a version, but I didn't publish it. And now I'm re-recording this because of the current climate that we're in. But I hope that you would find that it is still absolutely relevant. Now, I know that some businesses, especially small businesses, have been hit. Some of you have been massively hit due to the current economic challenges that we are all facing in one way or another. For some businesses, there is actually an opportunity. I mean, imagine what is happening with Zoom right now. And so when it comes to situations and challenges, the first thing is always to still take a step back and look and see and ask yourself the question, is there an opportunity here? Some of you are needing to upskill yourself on managing your teams remotely. And in the same way, I could have actually titled this being a virtual leader, but I titled this 21st century leader because even after this whole situation is over, I can guarantee that things will not go back to what we might call normal. And so what I am going to share with you is basically things that are going to accelerate this mindset. And the reason why I'm talking about a mindset shift is so important because this is the part that you need to really challenge yourself in your thinking. As a learning professional, when we design courses, one of the things that we look for would be behavior change. It's one of the areas that we will measure to ask ourselves, is the training effective? Have we seen behavior change? But what we're finding as we progress in this 21st century is that things are changing so rapidly that we need a new template altogether. And when I train or coach, I mention to my clients and leaders that we need to train to become 21st century leaders. And anybody that I've trained that's listening to this would know that that's something that I talk about a lot. But what does this mean? Well, it means that if you continue to think the way you maybe grew up to understand how business works, and that's an old sort of 20th century way, then you're playing what I would call an old school game. And, you could be playing along, you could be saying the right things, all this purpose and principles and all that. You could be saying them, but if you really haven't made the mindset shift, eventually you're going to struggle, and you're going to struggle to build your business or your team. And this doesn't actually matter what size of business or team you're leading. This actually is relevant for all leaders. Actually, this is relevant for all leaders of people. Whether it's a not-for-profit, whether it's a small business, whether it's a large business, a mid-sized business, this is for you. I found a post that highlighted some of these key areas. And so as I read through it, I thought, well, I can build on this. And so that's what I want to share with you today. As you are establishing your business, as you're, wrestling with what's going on, I think it's important for you as an owner, especially if that's the case, for you to really take what these principles, this mindset shifts, you need to take them seriously. But here's the other message, which is that this might not just be that you take it seriously. It might be something that you need to expose your team members to this new way of thinking as you're going through this, because I think it's going to cause a dramatic shift over the next few years. Yes, with this current pandemic, but I'm trying to look even beyond that and say, well, this is going to impact your bottom line. It's going to impact who you're able to attract, the top talent that you might be able to gain onto your team. Overall, it will impact your business, because this mindset that I'm going to be talking about, it actually is going to attract for you to then hire the right people to bring into your team. Now, you might not be thinking about that right now, but I think it's important for you to see this from a more principle base, that if you're still in the business and you want to grow your business, or you want to attract the right team around you, these mindset shifts are absolutely important. But before we go into it, let me just give you some background that this is just not my own thinking. You are also going to need to build what I would call a learning organization. And this is the key thing now, which is that this whole 21st century way of thinking is that you are actually building a team of learners where everybody is on a learning path. Now, this is so important. You would perhaps only begin to realize how important this is as most of organizations have become virtual. You know, I get messages every day due to the people that I'm working with that are asking me, how do I manage remotely? How do I now motivate my people? How do I engage my people? And, you know, I always say the same thing. Well, you can influence and motivate to an extent, but the better option is to teach people how to motivate themselves. And this is part of the whole idea of what it means to be part of a learning organization, where each individual is choosing to become a learner. Now, this is going to be the only way to stay ahead of the competition. Mark my words, it's going to be the only way to stay ahead of the competition. Why? Because things are moving so rapidly that everybody has to be able to gather the data, make sense of it, and then act on it. And if it's just at the top, which is a few people at the top are the ones making all the decisions, then you're going to be at a disadvantage. So now, for instance, a recent article by Harvard Business Review showed that employees in what was called a growth mindset company. Now, growth mindset company is what I'm talking about, which is that each individual is choosing to be a learner. Now, what they found is that 47% are likely to say that their colleagues are trustworthy. 34% are likely to feel a strong sense of ownership and commitment to the company. And also 65% are likely to say that the company supports risk-taking. And also 49% are likely to say that the company fosters innovation. You know, I put a link to the article in the show notes, but it simply shows that when you have an organization that is learning, where the individuals are learners, then you see more engagement. That was the whole idea of that a growth mindset company creates more engagement. And when you reflect on these stats and think about many business owners' dilemma about getting more staff to take ownership, then you realize that both you and your people need to be on a growth mindset shift, and that shift starts with you. So 5 key areas that you need to start making the shift on. So number 1, you need to shift from profit to purpose. Yes, this might be controversial, and we know that a business is not a not-for-profit organization. However, we're beginning to see that both staff and customers want to support a business that is out to make a difference and change its society, enhance its customers and the community at large. So we're not saying that profit isn't important. It absolutely is important. And you have to, especially in the current season, you got to look at the numbers. You got to look at where the company is going and how, at the end of the day, a business has to make profit in order to survive. So that's not the point. But where you put your emphasis is on your purpose in terms of what you're trying to achieve. The overall objective of the business should be purpose driven. So the question is, does your business have a purpose? Does it have a purpose statement that it's true to, that is trying to accomplish something that is meaningful? This is so critical because when we talk about engaging our staff, we know the research tells us, it shows us that people will be engaged when they know that they have work that is meaningful. But I can also give you other examples. Even in this current pandemic, we've seen companies turn their whole manufacturing part to help out with this pandemic. We've got companies that have just helped out to provide sanitizers. And there have been a few companies that have done this completely free. We've had CEOs share that they've realized that this is not an opportunity to make profit from this current situation. You see, these are examples of leaders who are 21st century leaders who have an opportunity to actually make a lot of money from this situation, but have chosen to prioritize their purpose over profit. Now, that's what I mean by this point, that you need to shift from profit to purpose. And what it means is that you're going to value the purpose of your business more than the profit. Not that profit is not an important part. So for me, I want to help business owners that are overwhelmed, that are distracted, that are burnt out. I want to coach them so that they can achieve their dreams. They can realize their potential through their business. And that's what Business Leaders Coach is all about, which is to support you to build that business that grows and flourishes and also helps your staff to have meaningful work. Because we know that societies change when not only businesses are providing products and services that add value, but we also know that when employees in those organizations are enjoying the work that they do, we have a better society. And that's what my mission is about. I want to help business owners see that they actually play a role with every individual that's under their own remit, both their staff and their customers. And that is where meaningful work comes from. And that's why a business owner that has a purpose that cascades that down to the business is a 21st century leader. So what is your purpose? You know, the funny thing is that case studies also show that over time, companies that have a purpose outproduce and generate more profits than those without. Harvard Business Review have done many studies on this, and I will put a link in the show notes to this. Number 2, you need to shift from hierarchies to networks. Now, this is something that is still a bit new, but let me tell you, the first time I recorded this lockdown had not happened. And I was just going to say, well, it's coming. Hierarchical structure is being destroyed bit by bit. But now just look at what's happened where almost all of us are working from home remotely. You find out that hierarchy no longer matters. Networks matter. You know, most companies are lagging behind on this. They still have a hierarchical structure, and that's going to destroy your whole influence. Because at the end of the day, what you find is the people that need to be in the know might not necessarily have the title. The people that have the information might not necessarily be in the right meeting. And so creating a network structure is going to be to your benefit. When you start running your companies via projects and processes, then encouraging staff to build their network is going to be more important than the usual structure. And so what I would suggest is that you begin to adopt an agile approach to your leadership, and you would then begin to eliminate the hierarchical structure, where the question is, who needs to be in this meeting right now? And that could be the frontline salesperson. It could be the cashier at the desk, because that person is interacting with customers and has the raw data. You get my point? And so what you find is that this hierarchy, where the top few are always in the room thinking about the solution, but they have no idea what's going on the front line, is going to destroy. This is where another podcast I'm going to do shortly is going to be on something called VUCA, which is something that came about from the army, which is that the world is now volatile, it's uncertain, it's complex and ambiguous. And the whole idea of VUCA came about during the war with Iraq, and the army, the US Army, realized that they needed information from the ground, and rather than them always having to be the decision maker, they needed to empower smaller teams to make decisions on the spot. And this is, again, it reaffirms the hierarchical structure doesn't work. Networks, smaller groups, smaller teams would work. So I'll talk a bit more about this in point 4. So that's number 2. You need to shift from hierarchies to networks. Number 3, you need to shift from being a controlling leader to an empowering leader. Massive, 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 massive point, especially as we're now working virtually. You know, I see this a lot. Unfortunately, many people find it hard to let go of power. And just to say that the empowering manager does not just leave his or her team to do what they want. You know, when we talk about empowering, it's not about leaving people, but what they do is that they gradually develop their team to become self-sufficient. And that's the main thing. It's not about just dumping and saying, okay, I'll leave you be, but it's about working with your team to become self-sufficient. And what I find is that many leaders find this difficult to do because they need a process, which I can talk about later on. But what you need to do is you need to learn to develop your people so that you can delegate effectively. And that's where it would lead to empowering. So number 3, you need to shift from being a controlling leader to an empowering leader. Number 4, you need to shift from just planning to experimentation. You need to shift from just planning to experimentation. Now, what do I mean by this? I'm not saying you shouldn't plan, because obviously plan is important, but shifting to experimentation makes you have a different perspective around your plans. This is one of the areas that you need to really begin to adopt this 21st century mindset. So many companies are moving away from waterfall project planning to an agile project planning, or using the startup way by Eric Ries, where it's more of a revolving feedback loop. You know, in the past, things had to be perfect before releasing the item, the product, the app, whatever it was. In today's world, you get it out there as a 1.0 version, experiment, and then, or it was called an MVP, a minimum viable product. And then from the feedback loop, you release the upgraded version. Now, this ties into building a learning organization, because by doing this as a team, you all learn together, and people are more likely to take risks and be innovative, because the plan wasn't set in stone that this is it, and once we release it, that's it, we're going to just sell. It's more of get it out there, get feedback, and then get it out there. But what you'll find is, this is really important, you will find it hard if you haven't trained your people to also be learners. Because some of us are wired that we want the perfect thing, we want the perfect article, the perfect podcast, the perfect this, until we won't release anything. Rather than just release, get feedback, make it better each time. And that's happened to me, I know. But this is something that for you and your business, how does this work for you? Really important point number 4, you need to shift from just planning to experimentation. So you need to make that shift. It's not just planning, but it's experimentation. We are experimenting. That's part of the plan. Final one for now is number 5. You need to shift from privacy to transparency. Privacy to transparency. This one might be a difficult one for some of us, but it is linked to the hierarchy, believing that you have to be at a certain level to know certain information. Now, if you're building a 21st century business, then you are going to have to build a culture where almost everyone is aware where the company is at, and then you're more likely to see engagement from people. But what happens is with a 20th century mindset, there's a thinking that, well, these people don't need to know this. I recall a coaching group that I was facilitating last year. We were going through some financial reports, and as I shared some information with them, I said, well, you should get your direct reports to be aware on this information. And one of the managers turned to me and said, Toya, I don't think we should bother them with this information. And I asked her, what is this information helping you? And she said, yes, a great deal. And I said, this is interesting. I actually ran a similar session with your manager and his team, right? Similar, his own colleagues. And so it was a team of this person's manager and all the similar at that level. And I said exactly the same thing, which is that it'd be good for you to also cascade this thinking down, have conversations around these numbers. And this person said exactly what you said, which is that, I don't think we need to bother our direct reports with this information. Now, this manager that I was talking to, right, in the room, her response was shocking. She said, how dare they say that we don't need this information? And then I said, well, if I brought your direct report into the room and he just heard or she just heard what you said, won't they say the same? Isn't it interesting how all of a sudden we have this mindset of, well, this is only for the privileged few to know, and we're not transparent. And yet, I think even right now, we're realizing that if you're, for instance, working virtually and you're not in the same office, how easy it is for team members now to be isolated. If you're not communicating, here's what's going on with the business, and people just won't know. I think this current climate has emphasized this even more. I was on a webinar from Harvard Business Review a few weeks ago, and one of the trainers was talking about how it's now even important, as we are all working virtually, for people to get a sense of your home life, what's going on in your own life. That's the part of transparency that makes us 21st century leaders. You're not just a robot. Now that we're calling each other via video conferencing, people are getting a bit more insight into our home life. And so you need to be open to share, your family life and what went on in the weekend and things like that. A bit more transparency does help in many ways. So you are going to need to choose to make a mindset shift from privacy to transparency. And you should decide where people need to have more information, because by doing that, you would naturally create engagement, number one. but it also just shows a level of respect. And what it also demonstrates is that you no longer have all the answers. And that is the overall point of a 21st century organization, is that you're going to realize, look, whether we, once we come through this, which we will, you are going to realize that you would no longer have all the answers, because what you're going to need information at various levels. And so the hierarchical structure needs to be demolished. There should still be roles and responsibilities at certain levels, but who needs to be in the room, who needs to be in the meeting, what you're going to find is that it will be different people at different levels in your organization. So I hope this is helping you today. So where do we start, right? Where are you going to start with all this? One thing that we know is clarity is one of the key things, to be able to create this 21st century mindset, not just for you, but for your whole organization. Having clarity on your purpose, having clarity of what you're trying to achieve in the short term as well as the long term is important. But let's just even talk about this short term right now. No matter what is going on, the one thing that you're going to need is clarity around your objectives and your goals. And this is the way you are then going to be able to help other people, to point them in the direction, whether it's based on the purpose, based on what you're seeing, based on what you're hearing, and then everybody can become an aligned team. So I have created something that I believe can support you on this. I've titled it The Ultimate Guide to Setting Clear Goals. It's 4 simple steps that will help you gain massive clarity and achieve your biggest goals. You just need to go to businessleaderscoach.com/setting goals. And then you can put your email address in and your name, and I'll send you a copy. It's free. What I've also done is I've recorded some videos walking you through how to set these goals. So go to businessleaderscoach.com/setting goals. That's /setting goals. Download that. It should help you provide the clarity that you need, because the clarity then supports the mindset. So these are 5 mindset shifts that you need to make to become a 21st century leader. I hope this has helped you, and I hope that it's going to help you survive even in this current climate. This is Toyosi Mbi, your business coach. You can go to businessleaderscoach.com. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple. Share this with other colleagues. Let's help you grow your business to next time, to your success.